It's spooky season, so I went to Salem, Massachusetts. Here I am at the burying point where trash bag Puritans who falsely accused, mostly women, of witchcraft and then publicly tortured and executed them are buried. And I went to the visitor center and I asked about the town's Black history, and the guy behind the desk looked me dead in my eyeballs and he was like, that's in Boston. No, friend. Black people existed everywhere, and I want to know what they did in Salem. Why? Hey, I'm Angela, I'm a professor, I wrote a book on slavery, and my research has taught me that generally Black people are the first to be erased from the landscape anywhere you go. So now, Black people's history is the first thing I look for. So I spent the day tracking down all of the places where some of the most interesting things in Salem happened, right? Part one, of course, was about Tituba, who got wrapped up in the Salem witch trials. Part two was all about the Salem slave trade, which includes a very violent uprising by enslaved Africans at sea. Part three was all about the meeting places of the Black women abolitionists of Salem. But that wasn't enough, because for number four, or part four, I found out all about the lost grave of another abolitionist, a woman by the name of Venus Chew. That one took me to her husband, a mariner by the name of Henry Chew, and that, my friends, took me to today's story. Charles Augustus Benson. So this guy had an amazing life, which we know about because he was one of the rare Black sailors who not only kept a series of journals from 1862 to 1880, but his journals also survived and made it into the collections of the Peabody Essex Museum. This place, right? And that's because sometime in 2021, they made their way to an auction site and were purchased by the library, right? So thankfully, someone there understood immediately how important a rare collection of 4 journals like this by a Black sailor was. From these journals, we know a lot about him. A bit more comes from this book here. His career as a sailor spanned over 20 years, and in that time, he worked his way up into the position of steward, which was more skilled and it was a position with considerable responsibility, right? And that meant that he earned more than double even the white sailors on board. So what did his journal say? So we know that Charles Augustus Benson came from a remarkable family already. His great-great-grandparents were both born in Africa and enslaved in Massachusetts. We also know that his great-grandfather married a white woman in an incredibly rare interracial relationship at that time. Their child, his grandfather, served in the Continental Army during the American Revolution, right? And then when Charles was 18, he worked as a shoemaker and moved to Natick, where he married Martha Ann Thompson in 1848. In 1852, he left her to move to Salem. There, he met a Black oyster dealer and restaurant owner named James Sherman. He took a second wife, whose father was a mariner. Once their first child was born, he sought out a higher-paying job and found one putting his cooking skills to use on a ship called the Gem. And he must have been pretty good at what he did because he continued to work for years, serving on board 8 other civilian merchant ships with voyages that took him to ports all around the world. He saw Zanzibar, Mozambique, Madagascar. Living in a place like Salem that prized those Puritan bootstrap values and spending time in Africa caused him to reflect a lot on issues that are still really relevant today, right? What does hard work mean when circumstances are unfair? What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be Black? He had very little formal education, but his whole life experience was an education, and working on a ship gave him lots of time to think and puzzle this stuff out. Still, life at sea was hard, right? He wrote in his journal, "What a miserable life seafaring is." Eventually, he missed his family too much and he returned to Salem near the end of the Civil War. Cooking jobs in Salem didn't pay enough, and for 10 years the family had to tighten their belts until he was forced back to sea. This time, his years of experience found him with a high-paying job as a steward that allowed him to send money back to his family, ensuring that they could live well back home in Salem, in the neighborhood where most Black sailors lived, Pond Street and Rice Street. On Christmas of 1878, he spotted a waterspout heading for his ship and was able to help maneuver it out of the way to avoid a collision with a whale. He kept up his journals until his death at sea in 1881. So if you're still here, please like, comment, and follow, and we'll get you some more Black Salem soon. Thanks.